Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we're covering on this week's episode. No, redistricting isn't the sexiest topic we could cover, but it is currently one of the most heated. But how gay really is redistricting? We're going to find out. New reports are abounding that LGBTQ organizations are just not doing very well across the country. How bad is it out there? Names and pronouns. There are new efforts in various states to restrict names and pronouns. What are these efforts? And also, why? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? This is a first for This News is So Gay. We have never had a repeat panel, but when this group was together a few months back, we said, yeah, we kind of need to keep this group together. And here they are with us. Joining us this week to answer all of those questions and so many more, reporter for the Ohio Capital Journal, Susan Tebben. Susan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Training director at Investigative Reporters and Editors, a nonprofit dedicating to improving the quality of investigative reporting, Adam Rhodes. Adam, it's great to have you back with us.
Hi, hello.
And for the fourth time, and thus officially, I think, meeting an Ohio residency requirement, digital editor for Indiana Public Broadcasting and the official sports ball correspondent for This News is So Gay, Lauren Chapman. Lauren, it's so great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, our LGBTQ Reporters Roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. So the last time the four of us were supposed to get together, Susan Tebben was pulled into a last-minute hearing in the Ohio State House on redistricting, and that drama continues to drag on. Susan, I said to your boss, David DeWitt, on last week's episode that the only reason I even partly understand redistricting is because of your reporting. Can you give us a brief update on Ohio's redistricting? And even more importantly, how does this affect LGBTQ communities?
I'm going to not be myself and take the compliment and run with it. Thank you very much, because we've now seemingly have some sort of resolution here. The Ohio Redistricting Commission met, which they only met because the legislature wasn't able to come to a bipartisan agreement on maps. These are the congressional maps we're talking about, I should specify, which means the ones that pick the representatives in terms of Capitol Hill, not the state legislature. So because the legislature couldn't come to an agreement, this moved on, according to the constitutional dictation, to the Ohio Redistricting Commission, which is made up of elected officials, the governor, the auditor of state, the secretary of state, two members each of the legislature from the Senate and the House. So it ended up being two Democrats and the rest are Republicans, which, as Ohioans have gone through this process for many years now, they could kind of see where things were going to land. Anyway, what ended up happening was Democrats first proposed a map in September that was going to be 8 Republican-leaning districts and 7 Democrat-leaning districts. They said was based on the voting trends of the last 10 years for the state, which is 55-45, according to data. Republicans said, no, that's an unfair gerrymander. We're never going to go for that. It's never going to fly. We're not going to do it. They had their own data as far as what they thought the trends were. We waited till October 30th. The deadline was October 31st. Republicans came in, brought a map that they had made without any public knowledge through staffers, and that map had 12 Republican-leaning districts and 3 Democrat-leaning districts on literally the deadline, 31st of October. It passed unanimously. So the Democrats also went for it in what they said was basically a stemming of the bloodshed to a certain point. They said we got much worse suggestions. We got, 13 too. We got, what they basically were trying to stop was if the Redistricting Commission didn't come into a bipartisan agreement, what would happen next is it went back to the legislature. And in that case, they would have till November, the end of November, to come up with a simple majority. Now, since we have Republican supermajority in both chambers, that wouldn't be hard, and it would
Right.
be whatever map essentially that Republicans wanted. So the Democrats' argument was we could either do that and not have any control over whatsoever, or take this map that looks bad, but could still be competitive come 2026. There's still the option of taking it to the Ohio Supreme Court and challenging it there. I actually just talked to some people today, and there's no real update in terms of whether that's going to happen or not. People are still talking about a ballot initiative as well. So looking back at, we had an effort to do that last year, which went down in defeat, which they were going to say, we're taking the commission out of this. We're making a new commission that's going to be Ohioans, citizens, not elected officials. The campaigns got very confusing. The ballot language that was approved by the ballot board essentially said what this ballot initiative would do would be to actually force you to gerrymander. So people were very confused as to what they were voting for. It ended up falling in defeat. So they're kind of, the people that worked on that initiative are picking up their, stuff and working on putting their clipboards together, but they said we need to have a strategy first. We're going to talk about this. We're going to take some time. We're going to try to do this right. So that's where we are right now. As yet, nothing, no court challenges, but if this map goes through, it's supposed to last until 2031. And that's
Okay.
the long and very long of it.
Lauren, I know that you feel very passionately about covering redistricting, and you talked a little bit about it on the last episode when you were on This News is So Gay. Tell us again how this is integrally an LGBTQ plus issue.
Totally. So the first thing to keep in mind is that Indiana's redistricting is wildly different than Ohio's because Indiana passed our maps in 2021. We also have a Republican supermajority in both the House and Senate. So this mid-cycle redistricting, which is what is happening in Indiana, is also what happened in Missouri and Texas, and what is currently being pushed in California, I believe. The voters still have to approve those maps. This is all because of the Trump administration. The Trump administration wants to make sure that at the midpoint or at the midterm elections, that it can maintain control of the U.S. House. Indiana has 9 congressional seats. So right now, that is split 7-2 in favor of Republicans. Indiana only sends 2 Democrats to Capitol Hill. And so the way that lawmakers are currently looking at it would be eliminating both of Indiana's Democratic representatives. To catch you up, at the end of October, Governor Mike Braun called a special session to have lawmakers come in and draw those maps. Lawmakers in the Senate specifically said, hey, we don't have the votes to pass these maps right now, which is crazy because Indiana, much like Ohio, has a supermajority in both chambers. So specifically in the Senate, there are only 10 Democrats that represent the Senate in Indiana, which means that in order to pass maps in Indiana, you just have to have a simple majority. So bare minimum, they need 25 Republicans plus the lieutenant governor in order to pass those maps. They don't have 25 senators right now, Republican senators, to pass those maps. So everything's getting a little bit crazy and a little bit hinky. The reason why the Trump administration wants these seats in particular, which we're hand-waving a lot of the gerrymandering and representation issues that would come along with redrawing those specific districts in Indiana. But the reason why the Trump administration wants those seats is so that they can continue to pass some of the legislation that they are concerned about. So when we're talking about things like federal bans on gender affirming care for minors, when we're talking about federal bans for gender affirming care for adults, when we're talking about, rolling back LGBTQ rights, that is going to come through legislation through Congress. And that's why all of these redistricting battles are so important for queer people across the country.
Now, Adam Rhodes, your dog Hibachi is famously not a fan of redistricting. Can you tell us? I'm just kidding. I don't have a
Oh my God, I
redistricting
was
question
so
for you.
terrified that I did. I was like, I have nothing prepared for this. Speaking of Hibachi, she's finally settled. She was building a nest next to me, so that's why I was super distracted, but she's fine and asleep now.
I will say my cat, Sassy, hated it because I left the house more often than I usually do. And ever since the pandemic, she has had major separation anxiety, so she hated it.
Wow, what's it like to have a pet who doesn't like it when you leave the house. I feel like Hibachi's like waiting for me to leave. She's like, I have plans, go away.
You can go.
There's going to be redistricting in all of our places coming up soon just for our pets. We will, of course, keep our eyes on that. Well, as I mentioned on last week's episode, here in Ohio, Equality Ohio, which is the statewide LGBTQ plus advocacy organization in the Buckeye State, they announced that they cut at least a quarter of their full-time staff, depends on who you ask, but for certain, including all of their regional field organizers. And this is not just an Ohio thing regarding LGBTQ plus organizations. Adam, you reported last week that LGBTQ plus organizations across the country are struggling.
Yeah, so the article I wrote for Prism really took a look at organizations that focus on mental health for LGBTQ plus youth. And pretty much universally, organizations I talked to were facing a crisis in some variety, whether it was drastic funding cuts, drastic decreases in donations, and I think, as we all probably understand, a huge uptick in need. You know, the people that they serve are some of the most vulnerable LGBTQ plus people, and also the queer people who have been targeted most explicitly by the Trump administration. And it is really just heartbreaking to hear that these organizations, who are quite literally saving lives, are sometimes on the brink of disaster. You know, I've talked to organizations that had to do layoffs. I talked to organizations that have seen a 70% drop in their donations. And it's just, I think, part of the overall plan of the Trump administration to really kneecap these social services, as one of my sources said. And again, these are life-saving organizations. And to quote one of my sources, he said, when these programs go away, it's not that like it's a social program that like can be taken up by another organization quickly. These are oftentimes like the only culturally competent places these young people can go for help. And, you know, again, the risk there is losing a life.
Yeah. We're working actually on a piece at the Buckeye Flame. We put together a survey with the support of the Human Services Chamber of Franklin County, where Columbus is. They had a whole survey for nonprofits in Central Ohio about how they're doing financially. And the survey is perfect. And with their permission, we just replicated the survey and put it out there to all the LGBTQ plus nonprofits in Ohio. There are a little over 100 of them. But we added one question, and we're just getting the surveys back right now. So we're starting to see everyone's answers. But the one question is, are you in an existential threat place? And so many of them are already coming back. It's not just about, yes, we've seen a loss of funding. We actually are not sure that we will be around at the end of 2026. And so that's extraordinarily alarming. Lauren, some new reporting from Indiana Public Broadcasting. They surveyed 20 LGBTQ plus groups in Indiana. What did they find?
The big headline is that community attitudes toward LGBTQ pride organizations and festivals actually seem to be improving as these groups are hosting events. And so there was a pretty significant survey conducted by WFYI in Indianapolis. 80% of organizations they reached out to said community attitudes had improved. 70%, however, reported negative or hateful comments aimed at events or LGBTQ people. And 35% said sponsors requested anonymity or withdrew support, which that seems to be the biggest thing that we're seeing across Indiana is, you know, organizations that have long supported LGBTQ organizations are pulling back their funding or are requesting anonymity. Very specifically in Southern Indiana, they saw that with their longtime sponsors. And those sponsors really cited concerns about potential political backlash or reputational harm if they were publicly associated with Pride. And so what it seems to be is this attitude of, we still want to support you. We still understand that you are valuable to our communities, but we also see that there is a potential threat to our organizations if we are publicly doing so.
And although it's not specifically an LGBTQ plus organization, it is one that is the main healthcare provider for huge swaths of the LGBTQ plus community. What is going on with Planned Parenthood, Susan?
It sounds like similar to what a lot of LGBT groups are going through, and money. I mean, specifically for Planned Parenthood, we're talking about Medicaid funds. The Medicaid cuts have been just absolutely decimating Planned Parenthoods. We've had 2 clinics close in the Planned Parenthood Southwest Ohio areas, Hamilton, and so that's the Cincinnati area. Planned Parenthood covers a lot of low income, and they cover a lot of LGBT, as you said. So there's a lot of different areas that are being impacted by this just because Medicaid funds are not allowed to be used anymore. And we have legislation that is being considered in the state to even cut it further and say the state Medicaid funds can't be used for Planned Parenthood specifically. So we also have Planned Parenthood Greater Ohio, which has now seen 2 different staff reductions. So that means that they're having maybe 1 provider in certain facilities plus support staff instead of when they would have 2 or 3. So you're seeing more barriers to care coming up. And yes, you're talking about Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, yes, does do a lot of stuff for low income. There's HIV screenings, there's STI screenings, there's gender affirming care that they do. There's all this stuff that they do specifically for the LGBTQ community. And if you are on Medicaid, you can't get those things anymore. And they're looking at these cuts that'll make it harder for you to be able to go because they don't have staff or they don't have a facility in your area to be able to do that. So we're looking at a lot of cuts that we don't know when they don't know when the end will be because the Medicaid cuts are still going on. They're still fighting them in court nationally. And even if, say, tomorrow they decide, never mind, we're going to put that all stuff back, there's a recovery time that's going to have to, happen for them to be able to get back on their feet and be able to do what they can do to help people out.
It's the messaging for me as well. We were talking about this a little bit off the air, and I'm bringing it on the air. It's the emails that we get from some of these organizations that I have a really hard time as both an LGBTQ plus Ohioan and also a journalist trying to figure out where is this organization at? Because some of these you think, oh gosh, are you not able to pay your electricity bill? Or are you doing really well and you're just looking for more padding? The day that we're recording this we don't have this as a topic, but the Supreme Court just declined thrice divorced Kim Davis's appeal on marriage equality. And I'm sure the rest of you all got emails right after, like I did, from different organizations fundraising off of that. And it's almost like some of the organizations were disappointed that the Supreme Court decided not to take on marriage equality because they're not able to fundraise off of some of the fear mongering. So I am obsessed with the messaging from the different organizations. And maybe that's why I'm not in charge of some of these organizations, because I would send something that said, FYI, not totally sure we're going to be able to make payroll next week.
It's a little bit hard to parse through it too, because the Planned Parenthood, obviously the administration wants to say the doors are open. We will stay open. We are going to continue this care. At the same time, we're cutting staff and we're doing all this stuff. And we have a labor union with the Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio who's saying, we're stretched thin. You can only add so much to somebody's workload and them being able to work as well as they could before. So it's really hard to see that balance of, yes, we're expanding into menopause care and we're doing all this stuff and we're keeping the doors open, but also 40% of our income just went away because they were Medicaid patients. It's difficult.
And I kind of just want to speak to like that, what Lauren, you spoke of, that people are afraid to support LGBTQ plus organizations or causes now. Like that's something that I really came across in my reporting, that like the organizations I spoke to said like, we are getting a lack of donations because people are afraid of pushback. There was an organization, IYG, which, shout out to Lauren, connected me with this organization specifically for this reporting. So not only is Lauren our sports ball correspondent, Redistricting pro, but like very generous journalist. Can't say enough good things about Lauren. And they said like they've had people drive like hours to like hand them donations because they say like, yes, this is important, but I'm afraid of this getting back to me, which I think speaks to both like the importance of the organization and like people's commitment to supporting them, but like also the moment that we're in, that like even like having your name on a list of donors can put you in harm's way. And these are just, regular people. These are not like high power politicians that like could face some kind of pushback. Like I think it is significant that, again, like just everyday people are afraid to support these organizations now because of the pushback that we've seen.
I would like to just very briefly put on I swear I have a PhD in nonprofit leadership hat, because I do think that fear is present and we see that a lot, but also we are seeing a lot of organizations do mission drift where they are trying to be something completely different than what they were founded to be. This is a whole different topic, but I am am obsessed with the messaging. We're going to keep our eyes on this as we move forward, and we'll see what happens with a lot of these organizations. Well, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. Shout out to Mr. Gabrielson at Pascack Hills High School in Montvale, New Jersey, my hometown, for drilling that Romeo and Juliet into our heads, because indeed there were many stories about names and pronouns this week. Lauren, in your 478th story for Indiana Public Broadcasting, we'll talk about the significance of that number in a few. There's a lot of drama in Indiana right now over driver's licenses. What is going on there?
Well, buckle up. What happened was, let's set the scene. Back in March, a handful of state lawmakers go to a executive order signing from President Donald Trump, where he signs an executive order basically to define the biological binary of gender. They come back to Indiana, and 2 days later, Governor Mike Braun signs almost an exact duplicate of that executive order. And then he goes one step further and signs an executive order directing all state agencies to enforce the biological binary. At the time, he said this wasn't going to change anything. This isn't going to, affect many things. It's just state agencies are going to enforce the biological binary. So it starts off where the Indiana Department of Health basically issues guidance to all of the county health departments to say that they will no longer process updating gender markers on birth certificates, making amendments to gender on birth certificates. Indiana's had that process in place for quite a while. It involves the Indiana court system, and they basically put a halt to that. There are lawsuits running in the background trying to push back against that, but so far, nothing has moved forward. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, and the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles proposes a new rule, which would eliminate the process for updating gender markers on driver's licenses. This is back in June. They open public comment period, and then in the middle of July, they host an in-person hearing in which they get 2.5 hours of testimony and completely in opposition to this new rule. They receive 1,600 public comments submitted as a part of this public comment period. And from what organizers and activists can tell, it's all in opposition. So they don't hear anything from the Indiana BMV for a hot minute. Then, all of a sudden, the BMV takes down the rule and then puts it back up a week later, opening a second public comment period. Now, the reason it was taken down was because after that first public comment period, the Indiana BMV went ahead and sent that rule for approval to the Indiana Attorney General's office. The Indiana Attorney General is vehemently anti-LGBTQ. I think I'm pretty safe in saying that. And so it is a little bit shocking as a journalist to discover from the Indiana BMV that the Attorney General's office said, hey, actually, we can't accept this rule. You have to open a second public comment period because of the sheer quantity of opposition to this rule. So the Indiana BMV in the background puts the rule back up, opens a second public comment period. At this point, Indiana activists and organizers start tolling the bell to be like, hey, what is actually up with this? BMV doesn't talk to those organizers until they literally hosted a press conference last Thursday. That's the first time anybody from the BMV had actually contacted them. And all of this is because of a process that's formally been in place since either 2005 or 2007. The information gets a little bit fuzzy because of Indiana's voter ID laws, but a process that has been informally in place for more than 2 decades because they want to make sure that trans people cannot update their licenses in Indiana, which used to be a fairly straightforward process. In some states, you have to have the birth certificate changed first. You have to have documentation and everything like that. At least for the last 20 years, Indiana's had a pretty straightforward process where you make the appeal to change your gender, you provide some sort of resources to say that, hey, this is who I'm living as, and you do the thing. So right now, the second public hearing is happening on Friday, November 14th in Indianapolis. And so we'll see if they continue to move forward. But this all traces back to that March executive order from Governor Mike Braun, which technically traces back to President Donald Trump.
Ooh, what a timeline. Interestingly, another convoluted timeline here in Ohio, Susan, a legal decision that actually defends misgendering. What is going on there?
Yeah, Shakespeare got nothing on us these days.
Yeah.
Um, so this happened, actually, it's a very interesting case. It happened last week. Judges on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals here in Ohio said that it is unconstitutional for a school in Ohio to punish students for misgendering their classmates. Why I think this is interesting is because it's really sort of we want to focus on what the students can do more than oftentimes we see parental rights. We see parents going after schools saying, well, they need to do this and you need to make rules about this. This is just, here's what the students can do, here's what the students can't do. And so the judge, and this is a fun time where Ken and I get to teach the general public about how to pronounce things in Ohio that are weird. The Olentangy local schools in the Columbus area, basically the judges said they cannot say that a student who misgenders another student, a transgender student, is in trouble because it does not materially or substantially disrupt the classroom, which is what they had to prove to be able to say that this was wrong. They also, of course, said that it would violate students' free speech rights, First Amendment rights, to be punished for saying the wrong name for a transgender person who wants their name to be used. So yeah, that's where we stand here.
Can we also push back against our colleagues who are calling this in various headlines? This was a victory for parents' rights. And, well, that's not true, because which parents are you talking about here? That's not something that Susan Tebben or Ken Schneck or Megan Henry would ever say. And as folks know, that is the holy trinity of Ohio journalists. That's just lunacy to call it parents' rights.
Right. Yeah, that is the fun little name that everybody has for these things. But a lot of times when you're seeing it's not the parental rights. It's the, I'll be careful in what I say, but it's parents wanting schools to tell people how to do things rather than parents having these discussions at home and saying, here's how you treat people and here's how you don't. And I'm sure there are conversations happening in parental homes that don't go along, that maybe agree with this court decision. But there's a lot of things happening in Ohio where we're saying schools need to say this, and parents should be able to raise a stink whenever they can about what these things, because school policy should say whatever, and we should be able to let kids out for religious reasons.
During school hours.
Right. And we should let them call kids whatever they want, whether we feel it's bullying or not. Parental rights is used for a lot of different things that maybe should be something that we let schools deal with, that we let parents deal with individually, all of that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Indiana, we've also seen that where so there was a version of a parental rights bill that was passing alongside a ban on gender affirming care for trans youth. And so a lot of the things that we heard from these parents who were testifying against the gender affirming care ban were like, hey, where are my parental rights? Where is my right to choose about the medical care for my child? Where is my right to choose about the safety of my child? Where is my right to choose about the things that are taught in my classrooms? Because queer history is history. We've always been here. We will never not be here. And we've heard a lot of that juxtaposition, and it's really interesting the way that the parental rights argument is trying to decentralize itself from one political party leaning or the other, and instead, going to something in the middle that absolutely isn't a part of that middle.
Which is so inconsistent because here in Ohio, it is the same parents' rights groups, and folks can't see me doing air quotes on that, who are also supporting the new bill that would allow schools in Ohio to have volunteer chaplains in every school because they would bring a moral underpinning. Well, wait a second. I thought you didn't want a moral underpinning in schools and wanted that solely at home. So just as a journalist, I need a little bit of consistency here, folks, because I don't know what I'm supposed to be covering. Adam?
Yeah, and I think, our journalistic colleagues love to kind of glom onto those euphemisms and just reiterate parents' rights without critically, interrogating what that means. And I think, Lauren, you said it best, it's parental rights to do one thing. like parental rights, again, in air quotes, like, and this has come up, frankly, in every discussion about LGBTQ plus rights. Like, there's always like religious freedom to deny same-sex marriage or marriage equality. Like, what about pastors, chaplains, whatever, who want to perform those? Like, how does that not violate their religious freedom to do that? So again, that is such a big part of my job at IRE, is to, talk to journalists about how we can do this better. And it really just comes down to like taking those talking points and really interrogating them and being honest and being truthful about what these really are. We've seen it in conversations about gender affirming care. We obviously are seeing it in conversations about what is being taught in classrooms. It is, I think, a lesson that journalists are not learning over and over and over. And as, queer people, as queer journalists, we see it having really significant impacts on people.
Yeah. I'm realizing I'm much more unhinged with this group of the four of us than I am week in and week out. So I think producer Gray would attest to that. Regardless, listeners, you are still listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, Susan Tebben from the Ohio Capitol Journal, Adam Rhodes from Investigative Reporters and Editors, and Lauren Chapman from Indiana Public Broadcasting. It is, of course, time for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing covered in the news. So let's set off our weekly Glitter Bomb. Adam, let's start with you. What queer joy are you seeing out there that we all should know about?
I'm just going to be honest. I love that Kim Davis lost her court fight. That is my queer joy. Just universally, like, girl, bye. That is my queer joy. A selfish little bit of queer joy is that I got a fabulous manicure. And that's really it. I take the victories where I can, whether it's cute nails, whether it's the Supreme Court, like, actually ruling in favor of queer people for once. So that's where I'm at.
Love it. Lauren Chapman, queer joy, where are you seeing it?
I'm seeing queer joy around my table when I play D&D with my friends. It is my little refuge from the news, and has been. We started playing this specific campaign in June of 2021, and so yeah, this is my alcove of queer joy.
Love it. We just did a story on LGBTQ youth finding a safe place in Dungeons and Dragons, and my gosh, that piece was everywhere.
Love.
Susan Tebben, where are you seeing queer joy?
Well, most of the reason that I was mad that I couldn't come last time because of redistricting was because now this is a little bit old. But Brandi Carlile's new album is insanely necessary for everyone to listen to. It's called Returning to Myself. It's everything. Mother is everything, and I just love her. And it's kind of a mix now because I just went to see Paul McCartney, and I'm getting there. Bear with me. I just went to see Paul McCartney live this weekend. Actually, he was here in Columbus, and for some reason, all of a sudden, he ran out with his band with an American flag, an Ohio flag, an English flag or a Union Jack flag, and the pride flag. Just ran up on stage and started waving it around. And so that was part of my queer joy, was this legendary artist that I've always been dying to see, waving around a pride flag all over the stage. And then on top of that, Brandi Carlile owns the world. So that's my queer joy.
I wish Brandi Carlile owned the world. Imagine how wonderful it would be.
Can you just imagine?
Why don't we have more lesbians in charge of things?
Well, finally, I am not in the habit of reading advice columns, but I stumbled on one called Ask Jake in Queerty. And Queerty says that Jake is a licensed mental health professional, so I'm going to take their word for it. That made me feel a little bit better. But one reader wrote in asking, quote, "City life drains me, but small towns feel too straight. Where do queer people actually belong?" End quote. So I wanted to ask this week's roundtable for our quick queer question: where is your geographical happy place? Lauren Chapman, where's your geographical happy place?
It is at Victory Field, section 206, row F, seats 1 and 2. Those are the seats that my dad and I go to every time we go see the Indianapolis Indians play, our AAA minor league affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And baseball just generally is my happy place. I will say that, oh my gosh, was it just last week? Yeah. World Series came to its stunning conclusion. 7-game World Series, 1 game of 2 full innings of baseball, bonus baseball in the World Series. Who could deny that kind of happiness? But I'm the only sports fan of most of my friend groups. And so in my gay little group chat, I was explaining baseball to my friends as they were watching Game 7 of the World Series with the Los Angeles Dodgers playing against the Toronto Blue Jays and winning their second World Series second World Series in a row.
Just want to remind our listeners, Lauren Chapman and I, we are not the same. Susan Tebben, where is your geographical gay happy place?
This is actually an easy one, and my geographical is in the mountains, and specifically a town called Breckenridge, Colorado, the little ski town, and it's where I got married 4 years ago, and it was in like the end of October, and they said the aspens will be great, and it'll all be great, and it'll be right before the snow happens. Well, guess what? We went 2,000 feet up, and the snow, the first snow of the year happened, and it made our wedding photos that much greater because
I was going to say, that sounds gorgeous.
I love snow and I love winter and all that stuff. So, and that is just the greatest little town to go in. Like, I think everyone's all stoned and it makes everybody happy.
Oh, yeah.
It makes the hot chocolate taste better. I don't know. It's the atmosphere, it's the whatever. But Breckenridge, Colorado, if you've never been, it's amazing.
I am obsessed with aspens. I have a whole grove of aspen trees on my arm because I very foolishly did Outward Bound in the backcountry of the Colorado Rocky Mountains, which you can read about in chapter 5 of my book. Seriously, what am I doing here? That's
I
a
didn't
real
even
thing.
plan a plug, but there we are.
I know, I love it. Adam, where is your geographical gay happy place?
Really, really quick. I actually grew up in Colorado, spent a lot of time in Breckenridge, have skied in Breckenridge, well, snowboarded in Breckenridge, and I say snowboard loosely because it was like a very bunny hill situation, but I digress. Really relate to that small town sensibility. I have to say, I think I'm very stereotypical in that, like, New York City is my queer happy place. It is where I moved from Florida after college, and it is where I felt kind of like my queerness blossom into what it is now. It is the first place that I felt comfortable, like, wearing long nails, wearing, like, feminine clothing and whatever. And my favorite part about New York is, frankly, there's always going to be someone weirder on the street than you. Like, there is so much power in kind of, like, that anonymity of just the sheer amount of people in New York. But, you know, a marriage of, like, that, you know, growing up in small towns, loving the big city is why I love Chicago. I like to say it's a big city with small town sensibilities. So New York City and Chicago are kind of my answer.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that the correct answer was the farmers market in Brattleboro, Vermont. But we loved your answers too. Finally, we want to hear what all of you are working on. Susan, what's coming up for you?
Oh, well, we're waiting to see if there's any redistricting changes, if the Supreme Court gets a court challenge or if we do ballot initiatives, all that stuff, but also the Planned Parenthood stuff. Keeping track of the government shutdown, which may or may not be ending, seeing what funding we actually can get back. So we'll see.
There it is. Adam Rhodes, what's coming up in your life?
You know, just my spate of depressing news as usual. I've got 2 new articles coming out this week. One that deals with the dismantling of USAID and its impacts on PEPFAR, which is the global program that helps fight HIV/AIDS around the globe, and just some legal issues here in Illinois with respect to name changes. So just stay tuned for those.
We are going to stay tuned. And I think in our 20-ish episodes, the most nervous I've ever been before asking this, Lauren Chapman, what's going on with you? Why was the 478th story significant for you?
Because the 478th story was my last story for Indiana Public Broadcasting. So there is good news for that, though. I do have a new job.
Oh, hell yeah.
I am in the process of moving across the country. I can't say where I'm going quite yet because it's not publicly available, but I can say confidently that I am going to the West Coast. So it snowed in Indiana over the weekend, and it felt like Indiana giving me a proper goodbye before I finish packing up all of my stuff and going across the country.
I was hoping Ken was
Wow.
true when he was saying residency, is that you were coming to Ohio.
That's what I was
really
pushing
hoping
for.
that
I
too.
think she's talking about the west coast of Lake Erie
Oh,
and
sure.
is indeed coming to, because I would hire you in a heartbeat at the Buckeye Flame, Lauren Chapman.
Let me tell you, though, I have given my emotional support middle-aged white man to Ohio. So the new managing editor for Signal Ohio's state government reporting team, Scott Cameron, is my now former boss. So I'm giving a parting gift for a reasonably tall white guy who very much gets it and supportive of LGBTQ journalists.
Yeah,
They'll fit
because
right in, reasonably tall
that's
white
what
men.
we were missing here in Ohio was reasonably tall white guys. So thanks for that, Lauren.
He
Thanks
doesn't
for
have
that.
a podcast, at least.
Oh my God.
Lauren, you get that in your third week living here in Ohio. It's just something that the tourism department just gives you. So we'll look forward to that. But huge, huge congratulations to you. And thanks for being back on the show, Lauren Chapman.
Thank you so much.
Can I change what my queer joy is? Because Lauren Chapman getting a job is my new queer joy.
Yeah.
We love that. We love that. Well, thanks to you, Lauren. Thanks to you, Adam Rhodes.
Thank you.
And Susan Tebben. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Again, I am Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, and if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts and rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Please become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming like this. And right this second, it's Newsmatch, which means that every donation is doubled until December 31st. And for a scrappy queer newsroom, that is huge for the Buckeye Flame. In the meantime, and I wish everyone could see all the pets on my screen right now with all of our panelists, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters and feed their pets, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.